everyone, my name is Terry. I am the Director of Curriculum and Communications here at Attollo. For those of you who may not be familiar with the work we do, we are a college access and leadership program serving more than 400 students in Lancaster County. So we work with specifically high school juniors and seniors. And I am super excited to be here today with Josh Hunter, the Director of Crispus Attucks Community Center. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so our first question today is, where are you from and what were some of your hobbies growing up?
Yeah, so I'm homegrown, so born and raised here in Lancaster, Almanac Avenue, Persian Ave, South Duke Street. That's currently where the center is. Yeah, I'm a really big reader. I try to find time now for it, but I was actually a really big fan of Harry Potter, so all the J.K. Rowling books and all of that growing up. But I also really been into writing and traveling. And when I say traveling, I don't mean out of the country or anything like that. I mean a day trip to Philadelphia to hang out in the park and maybe get a cheesesteak. That was really a highlight. And then, to come back. My aunt would always say we had champagne taste with beer money. So, it don't gotta cost a lot for it to be a great time.
Awesome. So within the stuff that you did even growing up, were there people or spaces or activities that really made you feel most like yourself?
I mean, I think just being outside in the neighborhood. So, Almanac, everyone knew each other. And even now, we'll go out and we were in Mexico one time and we ran into someone. My daughter's everybody. And I'm that's just from being outside, right? Playing manhunt. So, Almanac has the best hills, the best hiding places. So, just being in community. Spent a lot of time in the Southeast just growing up. So if there's one place that really has my heart and I'm really passionate about, it would be the Southeast.
That's really beautiful. I love that you're mentioning community and how that's the group that raised you. And I know that in past interviews, you've mentioned that you are village raised, so to speak. I'm really curious, when you say things like village raised, what does that mean to you in practice?
Yeah, so for me, it's really just being surrounded by a network of people, right? It's your family, your friends, your neighbors, just people who really just play a hand in your upbringing or growing up. It's the person who comes over to ask you for a cup of sugar or, a ride here or a ride there. It's really this collective responsibility. And for me, it's, I don't know, it's really about just supporting the well-being of others. It's really how you live into the value of taking care of, I want to say places that feel forgotten. I know sometimes we have conversations with just folks in the community and they, don't really feel like there's enough attention paid to the Southeast and some of those places where folks who are maybe have income limits and some of those other pieces. So for me, it's how do we support each other here to show people that we can do it and we will make it and we can survive.
I would really love to go a little bit deeper into that, because I think what you're saying about collective responsibility and the need to community build is really, really key. But I think a question that people often have when they're doing that work is how do you do that and do that work without trying to do it all by yourself, right? How do you find that community and carry that weight and responsibility without feeling like the world is looking at you?
I think there's a piece of setting boundaries. I haven't always been good at it, and it's still a work in progress. But it's really important for you to understand your limits and to really figure out what your non-negotiables are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, and how you're willing to show up. But also prioritizing self-care. I think for a while I was doing a little bit of too much of that. I was traveling, I was doing the things, but but I think sometimes we get so focused into the work that we don't say, hey, I need a break, I need to step away, I need to reevaluate and just reset and recharge. So I think that making sure that you're a priority as well. One thing that I've learned is you can't pour from an empty cup. To be present and to really know yourself in that space is definitely a lesson that I'm still learning. But I've taken heed to what that could look like. But also seeking support. It's okay to ask for help. I think getting to a place, just as a black man in this space and having a leadership role, sometimes we feel like we need to do it and we need to do it well. And we're not afforded the same opportunities as other people. And how do we show up in this space and get it correct the first time? And I'm starting to learn that's not the case. We can bring other people in and we can do this together because that's the true way to get forward.
Yeah, so I mean, I want to dive a little bit into that leadership role, and particularly that like unique hat that you're wearing. And so before you became the director at the center, so to speak, you first connected with Crispus Attucks as a camp counselor, from my understanding, and then you worked with other youth-serving organizations like the Boys and Girls Club. But I'm curious what lessons you took away from those roles, and maybe if you want to talk more specifically about how maybe that's influenced your identity as a Black male leader in the community.
I think being a counselor is just so hard because you have so many personalities. But I think the biggest piece that I take from that is the diversity that comes along with that, and how you show up empathetic in some situations. Sometimes you take home some of the stresses that these youth necessarily have. So for me, it's really like, how do I adapt in real time? Because some of the situations that you're thrown into, they necessarily can't wait to the end of the day. Like sometimes you need to respond to them, in real time. But also like, this piece of teamwork and collaboration is like, and so when I was the director of the Boys and Girls Club, we had a campus. So, we had the field across the street, we had the gym. Like, how is my team working together to make sure like everyone is safe? And like, how are we doing this to make sure that kids want to be here? It doesn't necessarily feel like school, but it's a fun time, but it's also a safe time. And just really this mentorship and guidance piece. How are we showing up for kids that see us, and what are we showing them, and how are we listening to them to make sure that they're going to be productive in society outside of our walls.
Right. I think a lot of times we make a lot of assumptions, I think, about what our community needs. And I'm really curious if those experiences, if you've had thoughts or have thoughts about like, how do you distill what a community needs versus like what an institution thinks that the community needs?
Yeah, so there's this piece of listening, and how do we, for me, we can't go into communities thinking we know the answer. So for me, I know like we joke around, but we host like chat and choose. So we literally just bring folks into a space and listen to them. And I think that's where the real work starts, is how do we come into your community and ask you what you need and how we can show up for you. Because ultimately I have a job because of the people in my community, because there is a need, and that's how we meet the things. There's this one story that I've heard is, there was a student that was in school, and the teachers, he said his refrigerator didn't work. So the teachers all band together and they raised enough money to buy this kid a refrigerator. And the kid came back the next day and was like, yeah, my mom stole the refrigerator. And the teachers are like upset, like, we did all this like to get you a refrigerator, but what they really needed was the electric bill paid. And so everyone's upset, but you gave them something that they didn't need. She sold that refrigerator to pay her electric bill, so that way other things are happening inside of this house that she really needed more access to.
That's a really, really powerful story, and that's going to stick with me. But I love that you also mentioned the chat and choose and having sort of programs and structured ways of making sure that you're intentionally listening and connecting. And I want to talk so much more about other things that Crispus Attucks is doing as a center. But I think before we can even really get into that, I think we have to talk about the name itself. It's Black History Month. We're an educational organization. We have to talk about some history real quick. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about who Crispus Attucks is, and why it matters that the community center bears his name.
I think we have like a lot of conversation with people that's outside the community when they come in and say, hey, like, we didn't know the center was here. Or a lot of people come in just to volunteer for like food bank or something like that, and they're like, I really don't understand like the meaning behind like Crispus Attucks. And someone challenged us last year to be the person, right? To be the first. And I was like, wow, that's powerful, right? How do we show up in a community where so Crispus Attucks was known as the first person killed in the Boston Massacre. But really beyond that, like the first African, like Native American that was like involved in it, right? And that started this movement of really just, I guess, just around like this legacy piece, but the really highlight the sacrifices and contributions that really Black folks have given to America. And when you show up into a building like that, it's like, how do I lead this organization with that mindset and that mentality of, one, right, being the first, but like also understanding the needs and the responsibility that comes along with. So having the center named after him is this powerful reminder of how we need to show up in the community. And we got a phone call from someone a couple days ago, and they were like, "Hey, I'm white. Can I like utilize the services here at the center?" I'm like, "We are a community center, so we're here for everyone, but that doesn't mean that we don't prioritize Black and brown folks and making sure that, you know, the activities and things that we do in that center really highlight and contribute to the success of necessarily folks that look like me."
So what does that mean to tailor your work specifically, right? So community centers are this space for everybody. Right. What does it mean to tailor your work specifically to one target demographic?
So for me, it's understanding the need. So for us, we built a network called Young Professionals of Color Network, and that really came out of this idea of what leadership looks like in Lancaster. We've been to a couple events where, you know, we are truly the minorities in the room, and we're just kind of stuck in the corner, and we don't really feel seen, feel valued, or feel heard. So we met with a couple local leaders and just said, "Hey, if we were to do this thing, what would it look like? And how could we approach it? And what would the feeling be, or what would the sentiment be in Lancaster?" And I remember one person said, "We always think about everyone else and we never think about ourselves." And so that just gave me like this sense of like, just lean into it, do the thing, and then we can figure out what happens on the back end. So we really put together YPOC to really build professional and personal connections. Too often we were finding out about things after they happened. So you might have had like this really dope thing that was going on, but because you don't have like this connection, we just missed it. And it also brings like this sense of like community building. One of our first surveys that we sent out from one of our first events, she wrote down on the paper, "I never thought I could go to a place with professionals and eat fried chicken and listen to Mark Anthony." Right? That was the highlight of it. And I was like, "Yes, we did the thing." And they're like, "Wait, that's not the just cheating." And I'm like, "No, we did the thing." That was it. They were able to decompress, not feel like they had to show up in a certain capacity and be in this space and be this person that they think everyone else wants them to be. They were just super chill, and I remember seeing her, and she was literally just twirling around in circles on the dance floor and just like no care in the world. But like, how many times can we show up, or like in what places can we show up and really be authentically us in spaces like that?
It's really beautiful, and I've been eyeing your Young Professionals of Color
Sign
group.
up.
I moved back here about 7-8 months ago, and I've had a lot of conversations with peers around like, what does it mean to find and build community here? And so when I saw the opportunity, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know that this existed here. So I'm also really happy that the collective is now getting to hear about this, in case anyone has been asking similar questions, looking for community.
We're about 2 years in. I think we're doing the things. We have a lot of chatter going on about the things that we got going on. So we're just really excited to welcome folks in to be a part of it. I think it's something special. Everyone always says it's your baby, and I'm like, it is. I need to nurture this thing. So we're definitely welcoming folks in, and the more the merrier for us.
So I'm sure only bigger and better on the horizon for it.
Absolutely.
So continuing to sort of build on the legacy of Crispus Attucks as a figure, but also the work that the center does, I'm curious your perspective on the role that sort of storytelling, cultural events, shared narratives, what do they play when it comes to building identity as individuals, but also as community? And I know that's kind of like a really big question, but I know that that's a lot of sort of the work that underpins what you do.
Yeah, I think growing up, like, we didn't always see folks that looked like us in leadership positions, so it was kind of hard to imagine yourself being there. So for me, it's like, if you can see it, you can be it. And I really believe, like, when young people hear stories and participate in like these culture events, they're really able to gain like the insight into history and just like really their ancestors, and they get to learn and to be in a space especially like the center, where you can kind of feel it sometimes when you go in. There's a history wall, and you can see like the different parts of like the Southeast that have come about. When I first started to lead Crispus Attucks, people were coming and was like, "Hey, I know you got strollers in the basement," and I'm like, first of all, how do you know the strollers are in the basement? And like, how do you know that they're for you? But like, that was the sense, right? It's their community, it's their center. Whatever comes into it goes back out, into the things that people need. So, we're really offering these opportunities for folks to feel like it's their home. It's really giving them, just this autonomy to really learn and hear the stories. And I think once you hear that, you start to find a connection and start to find ways that really reflect you and how you can show up. So
I'm curious then, what does the mission of Crispus Attucks look like to you now? Like, what is the core mission? And how has that changed since you first got there, as you've connected with people that have been there for years before you were, and who may still be there for years after you're gone?
Yeah, so for me, I think the mission stays the same. I think the main thing is the main thing. I think it's how we respond to events that happen in real time. It's how we show up. It's how we navigate through, trials and tribulations, and how we navigate through success. I think we always talk about the thing that we have to do and not the thing that we won on already. And I think like that's where we get hung up in like some of those pieces. So when someone challenged me to be the first, it's like, okay, how do I create this space, and how do I create events that really feel accessible, that feel welcoming, and really celebrate like the diversity of like everyone inside of our community. The mission, I think it just remains the same. We need to make sure that people are seen, they feel valued, and they feel heard. And we can do that all in the space. But for me, it's like this collaboration. And what does that look like, and how do we get there together?
So have there been moments where you've really seen, going back to how you said, if you can be it, you can see it. We say here a lot, you can't be what you can't see, right? It's the same idea, just a little inverse. Yeah. But are there moments in your work at the center where you've seen like that sort of cultural celebration or community investment really be a turning point for someone?
I think our Juneteenth celebration really highlights some of the work throughout the year. We have people from all different backgrounds that show up to be a part of it, and then when you see folks in your community just relaxed, just able to enjoy, whether it's a cocktail or it's a small bite from, a local entrepreneur, or just to feel that real, true, and genuine community spirit. That's where I think I thrive the most. So I would say like the highlight every year I always look forward to is like our Juneteenth planning, but I just think like all of our events we do with such intentionality, like our MLK breakfast. Like I just walked through and really just took a moment and just paused and just looked at everyone that was in the room and said, this is why we do the work, right? And there's some people that are there just to hear, right, what's the next thing they can do? And for others, like there's probably about 20 people that I know of, like that was their first time there. Like this experience is amazing. But for me, I'm like, yeah, that's great, but like what's next? Like it just can't stop at just being this day. And I think like for me, it's like we try to be consistent with like the work that we do and like how we can really like produce these events and like how we can show up in like communities.
Yeah, I was one of those first time goers to the MLK breakfast, and there's a couple others in here who was their first time as well. And I really, really enjoyed the experience, and I felt very, very fortunate to be there, especially with the rest of the team. But you've talked about the intentionality that goes into planning events like Juneteenth and the MLK breakfast. How do you intentionally design these sorts of programs and spaces that support people and the future that they see for themselves?
I think for us, there's always some kind of pushback, right? When you're having something that's geared towards, a specific race or a specific community or things like that. But I think for us, it's how do you focus on the people who are on board and not the people who aren't? Because for a lot of my, the first year there, I'm like, well, this person might not like if we do this, or this person might not like if we do that, and not really not paying attention to the people who are already invested, right? And I also had to like shift my hats too, because the people who are invested and who are on board are the people who are donating, the people who are giving and making sure that you can do the thing. So like, how do we capitalize on that? So for me, it's like showing up in this space and really listening. I think if I always go back to something, it's listening. It's what's working well, and like, what is the need for this? So we circle back to like, why is this important, and why do we do this work? And if we can't get to a yes, or get to an understanding of like why we can't get to the real why of it, it's probably not something that we should be doing. So we always circle around at the table to try to figure out what's best for community work.
I really admire the perspective of tailor it to the people who are already invested. I think a lot of times in work that we do, we're always trying to say like, who can we bring in next? Who can we bring in next? Rather than saying like, how can we just deepen the work that we're already doing right here? So I really, really admire that. Sort of just continue to think about like community centers as a space of growth and purpose. I've often heard community centers described as like safe spaces, right? They're somewhere people can go and always feel like loved and held and supported. But I think that they're also a really awesome space for like leadership and building agency within people, especially people who are often working in systems where they may not feel like they have a lot of agency. I was hoping you could speak a bit to how does the center do that work of offering support while also continuing to build agency and leadership, especially for young people.
I think the first thing I told people was like, we listen and then we build, right? We don't go in with like, it's like, you know, and sometimes I do it well, do it well sometimes, but I'll get like something, I'll put it together without looking at the directions, and then I'll go back and be like, why isn't this thing working? And I'm like, because I missed this step in the direction. So for us, it's like really sitting down, really listening, and then kind of tailoring it to like what that needs. So we're listening to folks when they come in, and if it's like the same, like we find the same messaging of like, people don't feel safe here because X, Y, and Z. Okay, how can we make sure that we're incorporating that into this space so that way we're not doing the same thing that other people are doing? I think we do a really good job of like inviting folks in, but then like my next task was like, what do we do when we have their attention, and what does that look like? Sometimes people just want to be heard. I know I was sitting in my office one time and someone came in and there's a freaking flyer, and I'm just like, listen, I'm going to do my work while you sit there and talk. I'm going to repeat a few things back to me. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly, and then we can find a solution that works well. But it's just opening the doors, letting people come in, letting people sit there for a meal. So, you know, we do community meals every Tuesday and Thursday. I try to make sure that my schedule is clear so I can sit and eat with people. I think there's value in breaking bread with other folks. So I'm sitting there, I'm listening. You know, some people complain about my Eagles, and you know, it is what it is. And you know, we find a common ground. And I think for some people, it's that center.
I love the idea of breaking bread with people. I really think that that's an incredible leadership style. And I think maybe this is a hot take, one that's been lost a lot is like the actually actively sitting down with people and not walking ahead of them, but walking with them in that work. And I think it's very interesting when we talk to our students. I think I've heard, and I actually did my master's research on Attollo, and I heard through that research a lot of students expressing that in different spaces of their life, they feel heard in different ways, and that there are spaces where sometimes they feel really, really validated and seen and heard and valued to those three points you brought up earlier. But often, honestly, school is a place that sometimes it's a bit tough for them to get that same sort of attention. And so even though schools and nonprofits and like Attollo, like the Crispus Attucks Community Center, we serve the same young people, but we're not always necessarily aligned in the way that we go about doing that. So I'm curious from your perspective, what would like a real partnership look like between schools and community organizations when it comes to making students feel seen, valued, and heard?
I think there's this real important piece of like pouring the chair up to the table, because sometimes we're so siloed. Like we have a meeting here, they have a meeting here, and we don't necessarily know what's going on between the two. So like I'm getting one of your students, and they're coming to my after school program, and they're failing everything, right? But we don't know that, and they're here, and we offer homework help, and we do all these pieces, but because there's not this communication between each other, we don't necessarily know how we can best support this student. So I think that piece of like, how well do we communicate with each other? How well do we share resources with each other? And how well can we collaborate with each other? And sometimes, and I'm not going to push it all back on the school. Sometimes as leaders, we need to go into the schools and say, hey, this is where the disconnect is that we feel, and like, how are you willing to show up in this space? Because sometimes they don't know. And honestly, it's a lot of work for them because they are dealing with the kids, 8 hours a day, and sometimes they're burnt out, so they don't have the time after school to come over and be like, these things are happening. So I try to be intentional and make myself known and seen in the schools, so that way I'm walking in, I'm attending lunch series, getting to know like students individually, and then that opens the door and it's like, hey, how's this kid's grades? Right? So sometimes it's a little bit more of like coming out of your office and coming out of your space. Folks are always like, you're never in the office. And I'm like, because there's more work to do. There's things out in the community that we should be doing. There's other places that we should be. And I think like for us, it's like maybe going into these schools and figuring out how we can best support them. And then they're a little bit more receptive of like how they can help us.
I think that resource sharing piece is really key. And actually, something that I think honestly we could probably do more is getting back into the schools. We do our 5:30 a.m. onboarding program with our students that takes place in their schools, but after that, honestly, there's not a ton of us being
That's
actually boots on the ground.
I'm not a 5:30 a.m. person.
Yeah, no, trust me, it's.
I struggle rolling out of bed. I mean, my wife gets up and she's out the door by the time I'm like, where did you? And I'm just like, oh, it's time to get up. I hit snooze on my alarm about 5 or 6 times. I work out in the afternoon or in the evening, so I should say. So that's a really big commitment and dedication that I do see that happens here. So kudos to all of you because I don't think I could ever see a 5:30.
It's definitely a commitment on our end, but I think honestly the commitment is even more admirable on the students' part, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones showing up 5:30 a.m., trusting and believing in something that they don't even fully understand yet, right? And I think that's one of those ways in which we're sort of filling a need that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
I want to think too about some of these like other sort of challenges around doing this sort of work, right? Like you've identified that it's a time commitment. It is a commitment to go be in the schools, boots on the ground. Can you share a moment when the work felt particularly difficult, trying to navigate those real constraints, whether it's time, money, resources, otherwise, that may have been limiting what you wanted to do?
COVID. So I came in boots on the ground, fresh into COVID, into the uncertain, trying to figure the things out. And for me, it was a scary time, but I can only imagine how scary it was for folks who didn't have the resources or who didn't have the access. So for me, it's this piece of like, how do we do this thing without, knowing if the funding was going to come, but also how do we build this out? Because there was so many rules and so many stipulations of like how many people can be in the building and how far you could be, and with social distancing and masking and all these pieces, and how do we take that and how do we adjust to it? How do we pivot? And like I mentioned earlier, like working with all these students and all these different backgrounds, I think that gave me this one up of like, how can I really see people and how can we support them in a way that really feels still really good. If anyone you ask, they'll say like, I was totally against like boxing food up and like giving food out because we take away this sense of dignity from folks. And like, what if you don't eat pork? I'm putting pork in your box and like you can't eat anything now because if your pork touches it, like, you just can't do you can't do the thing. So for me, it's like, how do we still honor folks when they come in here, but how do we do it in a way that is really, serves with dignity? And I think like there's this other piece, and I, not getting into politics, but like the government shutdown, people were scared. They were going to lose benefits and lose resources and lose, some of these pieces. And like, how do we navigate and go into a space and say, you're going to be okay? And people were like, actually, I'm not. Like, this is the way that I feed my family. And then we see people who are, have to navigate between paying a light bill or getting food on their table. So, some of those pieces are it was really, really hard to navigate. But I think like the hope came from how our community shows up. Our community showed up in big ways, and what we always celebrate is the folks who give the thousands and the thousands and the thousands. What we don't celebrate is the people who give the 5 and the 10, because that's all they had. And that's how they show up for the community, because they know there was a need. And they're saying, listen, I may be taken away from the things that I have, but I know there's someone else out there that's worse than me. And I'm going to give them this 5, I'm going to give them this $10. And this is how I'm going to show up and be a part of the solution for my community. So I think that's where, like, on the back end of like how you keep going in times like that. I see someone giving a $5 bill and I'm like, I just complained about this had nothing to do with, and they just gave me their last. So
that actually makes me think about the keynote speaker from the MLK breakfast telling the story.
Yeah.
Think about his grandmother and all the people that she gave and gave and gave to, even when they didn't have anything, and at the end of her life.
Yeah, I think
they showed up big.
I think we all sit sometimes in that space of like, you keep giving out all this stuff, we're not gonna have nothing. But that's just, I think, like, as a community and just like as people, like, that's just, I feel like we need to get back to that. We need to get back to just caring for other people and showing up for other people, and being in the space of like, you know, giving is important, and it's not always about like what we receive.
And I appreciate that you're really highlighting that. It's not always a big thing. It's not always you giving like the biggest possible gift ever. It's just doing anything. And I'm curious, before we open it up to audience questions, for students that we have that might be really, really passionate about justice or community building, or honestly just supporting others, can you give them maybe 3 concrete steps that they could take now, even if they're not sure where that path's going to go, what they want to do as a long-term career? Like, what is something that they could do today?
I always tell people, get involved with something, anything. Doesn't matter what it is. You might hate it the first time you go do it. I know I don't like cats. And I went to go volunteer at a shelter, and it was like the cat thing was a thing for like me to do. And I'm like, oh, I absolutely hate this. Right? It was the worst experience ever. But it was something that I did, and like I did it and I found out I didn't like it. So I'm like, okay, what is the next thing that I can do locally that will help support like something in my community? And I think the other thing, you know, after that is like educate yourself on a thing, and figure out like maybe why you don't like it or why you will enjoy it, and then take the next step and then do that thing. But also build connections. It's so critical right now. I always tell people it's not what you know, sometimes it's who you know. So build it, and it could be with your peers, or it could be through like a mentorship piece. I don't know if Jordan remembers this, but I know he'll listen to this. But when I was applying for a job, one piece that was gonna like hinder me was like I needed some money to pay for my clearances. And at that time, I'm like, it's another stress for my mom. Like, I got to go back and ask her for $80 so I can go apply for this job. And at that time, Jordan was my mentor, and I was like, yo, I don't got the money for the application. And he's like, here. But you know what, Jordan, it came with a lesson. It came with a conversation. You know, it came with the pieces, but like that stuck with me, right? It's like you invested in me in a time that I needed the most. So for me, it's like, how do I return that favor, and how do I show up, and like, but that was a connection that I built, right? And it was a forever connection. You know, now we laugh and we joke and we do other things, but like, it was like that moment, I feel like set me up for this motion of success.
And now you pass that on on a daily basis. Yeah. So awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to open it up to our lovely audience if anyone has any questions.
I mean, I got mad questions, but I'm like, wow, you said almanac, best manhunt. I was like, that's absolutely wrong. But anyway, okay. What I'm really curious about actually is, how do you feel growing up in this community, all right, and knowing what potential, like the Crispus Attucks reputation that it had, all the good things and amazing programs that it had before, and then now leading it. And being able to give back to the community that you grew up in. I don't think enough people talk about that and the beauty of that. So I'm just curious, like, how have you grown in that? How do you perceive it? How do others perceive you, perhaps? Do you even think about that at all? Because it's certainly something that I think about when I see you and myself, honestly.
I think like my first couple of years, it's this thought of like, how do I get it right? We're in a place that means so much to so many, and how do I show up in a community that I'm a part of, and if I fail at this, what will people think of me, and then how do I continue to keep showing up, past that failure? But I think people know my heart, they know my intention, and they know that I'm here to do the work and to do the work well. So if I do slip up, it's like, oh, everybody has a bad day, but it's not. It's this piece of like, how can we help support him? And I think like that's where I found the most encouragement from. People aren't always looking for you to fail; they're looking to see how they can support you, and that's what I had to be open to. But it's an amazing feeling to be able to walk down the street and know everyone that's on the block, or know people's names. And I think it's important for people to feel that as well. When people are coming through, food pantry, I think we talk about this enough, is like how much pride you have to put aside to show up to some of these places and receive some of these resources. So for me, I don't take that for granted. It's an opportunity for me to walk alongside folks and really be in their space and show up for them and their environment. Yeah.
I have one.
Yeah.
Hi, cousin. This is a two-part question. The first part is, did you see yourself in this role coming up as a young kid from the Southeast? And then the second part is, what would you tell your younger self?
No, I thought I was going to be a police officer. I thought growing up I thought I was going to be a police officer, and I thought I was going to be a police officer because there wasn't many of them that looked like us, and I think that still is the case, to a certain extent. But I had this like mentality: I'm gonna change the world, right? And I'm gonna do it from this high level, and not knowing like right now this work is really important. It's really reaching people, and it's really walking alongside people, because these are people who don't necessarily know what tomorrow is going to bring them, right? And I always think back to like, if this is their last interaction, how well did you make it for them? So while I didn't see myself in this position, I know the weight that this position carries right now. And if I were to tell my younger self anything, it would be that you can do it. Go for it. You only fail when you don't try. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. These one-liners.
Yeah.
I'm about to start a quote list. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to take notes for myself. Oh my.
I normally like to ask people who are doing something that they're passionate about. I like to ask them this question: what's the most rewarding thing that you've experienced? And then also, what's the most trying thing you've experienced in the role you are now?
Yeah, I think the easier question is like the most rewarding is people get the things that they need. Oftentimes, they sometimes go into places and they just get the bare minimum. But I think when they come into us and they see us, they get all the things. They get the smiles, they get the food, they get the resources, and they get the what's next. It's like, when can we come back, or when can you be available for me? And we try to make sure that our team is available for them. The most trying thing, sometimes I would say, is the attitudes that sometimes come in the building. One time there was just miscommunication with just like our team, and it became like a boots on the ground situation. I called my wife, I called my mother-in-law. I was like, hey, we don't have lunch here. And they came and they made sandwiches. I mean, packed sandwiches, chips, all the things. I was like, we gotta give them juice, we gotta give them snacks. Everything gotta be in this lunch. And the lady came in and she was like, this is all I got, a sandwich? I got a bed for a sandwich? And I'm like, do you know how much work my wife and my mother-in-law put into making these sandwiches? But but I also had to learn, like, don't make it about that person, right? Their attitude doesn't reflect the mass of the work that we're doing. So look past that, and for me, it's like, you always got to put a smile on and be like, I'm sorry that, you feel that way, but that's going to be the best sandwich you ever had. Just give it a try. But really having to shift my focus and saying this is just one person, and who knows, everyone just might have been having a bad day, or maybe that's all they was eating was sandwiches every day. Is really shifting my focus and really pouring from a cup that's really energized and really refocused. So
I think we have time for about one more question.
Do you mind passing him the mic? It's right behind you.
So I had a question about sometimes you said like you may not know the problem, so like you go into the community and listen. Even after listening, sometimes it's still hard to kind of decipher. So how do you ground yourself, or like who do you go to when you want to do something but you don't know what to do?
Whew. So I have a bunch of mentors, but I think like in the work that we're doing now, my CEO, I know sometimes she hates to see me coming. I mean, I go in like a whirlwind, and I'm all over the place. And I think she has a way of grounding folks. She has a way of like, what can you do now in this moment, right? What is the absolute piece that you understand, and how can you tackle that? Because what you don't know is what you don't know. And you can always come back to the drawing board. But there's this sense of really pausing and sitting with it for a little while. And I've learned that, through some of my emails. I do this 24-hour practice before I respond back to an email that I might not like or so. So really pausing myself in that moment and saying, what is it that I can fix? What's the immediate thing that I can do? But also like, how do I authentically say like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to do the thing. But I think like that's the beauty of like Lancaster, is because we have so many resources here and we have so many people who can help you do the thing. And sometimes it takes that axe. You're just asking other folks, so like, hey, let's get a meeting of the minds together, and let's get together to figure out how we can help best support or do the thing.
Love that question. You talked about pouring from a cup that's energized. So I'm curious, outside of your work at the center, what brings you joy? What is energizing you these days?
Wife, is there work outside of the center? I mean, my wife, my daughters are in all-star cheer. We were just talking about that a little bit earlier, but like that consumes a lot of our life. But for us, it's this excitement of a thing that we get to do as a family, and how we get to show up for them. And maybe 2 minutes on the mat, but it's the best 2 minutes of their life. And it's how we can cheer them on from the crowd, and how we can be connected through that sport for them. And I started a little light workout. Kind of fell off a little bit. Cousins over there giving me the side eye. But we, me and my wife, we hit the track together. We do some of those things that keep us grounded and keep us, connected in a way. But I also say a good spades game. I'm down for a good spades game anytime, anywhere. So, just going out, some family game nights and some, some of those pieces, but really, just finding something that really just takes your mind off of like all the things and just being present in spaces sometimes.
I think the way that you talk about your family is very beautiful, even in many other interviews that you've done. And I love you talking about it, even if it's just 2 minutes on the mat. Yeah. It matters so much to them, so you're happy to be there celebrating. And I think we can all say that you're definitely a cheerleader. You're definitely a cheerleader yourself.
I don't do it right. I don't have all the language.
You might not be on the mat, but
sometimes my wife was like, "You're not supposed to say that." I was like, "I don't know, hit." They're just like, "No, not through the whole routine. Only when they jump." And I was like, "Okay, I got it." And it's only 3 times throughout there, and I was like, "Okay." I know people, they were looking at me like, "Why does he keep saying hit?" I was like, "I'm new to this. This is our first year."
You're a lifelong learner,
right? So I'm curious. I stay curious. So yeah.
My last question for you before we wrap up. How can others get involved in the work that you're doing at Crispus Attucks? I know some years ago, my mom and I went and volunteered, and we are long overdue to come back. But I'm curious if you have anything up and coming, any sort of regular opportunities that we or our students could get involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say volunteer. Volunteer time. We have our food bank or choice pantry. Our choice pantry that operates every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, and that's from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. But folks can come as early as 11:30 to come help stock shelves, sign people in, speak with neighbors, all those pieces. And then every Tuesday and Thursday we host our community lunches, so folks can come in for that. I know we have some programming that's coming down the pipeline that we're really being intentional about kind of rolling out, so we'll have other opportunities there. But the most underrated thing is spreading the word of the work that we do, and how you can show up and be educated about the center. I know we had this conversation about folks really don't know, like, who Crispus Attucks was, or like what the center is, or like where the center is at. Like, do like take some time and do some learning, on your own, but also, how can we collaborate? Are there ways that we can collaborate and, spin some ideas off each other and like really show up for the community the way that we need to? And I'm never going to leave out. You can always donate. We'll always take the money. We'll always take the money. So yeah.
Yeah, let's definitely connect.
Yeah,
Go to the drawing board
yeah,
together.
for sure.
I think we are very much aligned
Yeah.
in the mission of the work that we do of building and supporting community.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciated this conversation and your insights around community building and especially the value of listening. So thank you so much for sitting down with us, and thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.